Hello and welcome to the 1/160th photography podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about two things, and it's the first time I've talked about two separate things in an episode, but each thing didn't quite feel big enough to fill out an episode or have enough discussion on. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Zoom calls, because we're all doing Zoom calls. I'm not actually doing Zoom calls for my job, but I'm doing equivalents of Zoom calls. And it struck me one day that as photographers, we can probably make ourselves look much better on Zoom calls with the kit we have than other people. So we know about lighting, and we've probably got lighting and soft boxes and other things, and probably, if we really wanted to, we could make ourselves look slightly better on Zoom calls than dingy webcam look that everyone else is going for. However, I've just had a call with colleagues, and it was one of the first times I've ever switched my webcam on. And of course, it didn't look particularly good because I'm sitting with my back to the window, so that was overexposed. And obviously to expose for me, that's completely blown out the window outside. So would I have set things up with a nice softbox and a nice reflector? Probably not. However, I would have the know-how should I want to. So it's just a bit of an observation, that thinking about Zoom calls and setting things up to look better than colleagues, I suppose, or put yourself forward in the best possible light. Second thing I wanted to talk about today was the new Adobe Camera app. So I've got it up here. It's Photoshop Camera, and it could be many things. So Adobe Photoshop Camera, it could be many things. But the biggest thing it is to me is a disappointment. It's free. I think the idea of it is, rather than do editing after you've taken the photo, your photo has the baked in edits, but it doesn't quite have the baked in edits because you can go and change things afterwards. So it does face detection, and you've got studio light, portrait, pop art, spectrum, Billie Eilish, artful, food, scenery, blue skies, and reverie. And you can get more filters. And within each group of filters, you can then change the filter ever so slightly. So Studio Light, for example, has 6 different filters. Now, initially, when you download this app and you run it, it runs a bit slow. It's got a bit of lag, and there are things you can download that give you sort of extra filters. But ultimately, it's a bit disappointing. Probably my favourite is Spectrum. That just has like a red and blue sort of shifted look. That's probably my favourite. Studio Lighting attempts to blur the background, and Portrait attempts to blur the background, but they don't do a very good job. I've got an iPhone 6. I don't think it does a very good job. And under closer inspection, I don't think it would pass anything. However, I sort of feel like that with more modern iPhones, that under close inspection, it doesn't look that good and the blurring doesn't hold up. But maybe on the iPhone 11, they've solved that and it's better. So I've got to admit, I was a bit disappointed with Adobe Photoshop Camera app. And of course, once you've had a few goes, it just becomes a bit of a novelty. So you can take a photo with it, and it stores the photo in the app, and then you can go and change your lenses. So you take the photo, and then if you picked portrait, you can go through the different portrait presets, or if you feel crazy, you can go and do pop art. And of course, you can go and change things like the background. You can make the background bigger or smaller. And I'm talking about pop art, so you can change how things look. So it's got sort of a comic background in pop art, and you can make it bigger or smaller, which does change the look. Spectrum can't really do that. There's no sort of background interaction. You can do things like make a video of it in this Billie Eilish one, but ultimately, what's the point? I guess if you were going to do those effects anyway, it would save you time, but I'm not really ever going to do those effects. So it wouldn't ever save me time, and I wouldn't ever shoot a photo to take that, especially on my mobile. So unfortunately, I think it's a bit of a failure. I think it's a bit of I can't really see a use for it, and I'll probably get rid of it. Now I've tried it out and realised it's not for me. But what do you think? Is the Photoshop Camera app, is it something you wanted? Is it something you need? Or is it something you never thought you'd need, but you'd actually quite like it? So in this shorter episode than normal, I've combined two things that I wanted to talk about: using your lighting skills to improve your Zoom or video calls, and the disappointment of the Photoshop Camera app. Stay tuned next week, because next week I'm going to be talking about Kickstarter. Thank you. Goodbye.